Hello! This is my very first Deltarune theory, and I think it's a very interesting one. Spoilers for Chapter 5, obviously, so don't watch this until you've played through both the normal route and the weird route. After playing through Chapter 5 of Deltarune, I had some very interesting thoughts regarding the identity of the knight. I'm not going to be recapping the chapter either. Spooky Dude already made a great video covering that, so I suggest watching that first. Alright, buckle up, because this video is going to be crazy. Currently, the three candidates for the knight are Des, Carol, and Rudy. Also Papyrus too, but I'm not going to talk about him. I think that each candidate has a good amount of evidence regarding their status as the knight, but also a good amount of holes and flaws with being the knight. I'll go over a brief overview of each candidate. Des seems to be the community's favorite pick, and for a good reason. The knight summons a bat when we first meet it, to it looking like a baseball in its ball form. The Black and Knife theme and Lost Girl theme share motifs. Oh, and also the antlers, of course. And the fact that Des is probably in the code and we know nothing about her, so what better pick? My problems with Des being the knight tie into the motivation of the knight, and also the motivation of the second knight candidate, which is Carol. Speaking of Carol, Carol has antlers. Wow, interesting. Carol seems to be skilled with a blade, as she has not one but two katanas in her house, which, first of all, why the hell do you even have that? Then, the phone caller pretty clearly is Carol, and why would her voice sound so weird if she wasn't the knight? My problems with this are, I think the story is trying to point us in the direction of Carol Knight a bit too much. I think this candidate is a red herring. Now, how this ties in with why I don't think it's Des being the knight, Carol is very clearly looking for Des, or at least trying to solve the mystery surrounding her. Now, we also know that Chris, Carol, and the knight seem to be working together. If the knight is Des, why is Carol continuing to do what she's doing? If she's looking for Des, well, Des is right there. Sure, she looks a little different, but that's fine. Last but not least is Rudy has antlers. Okay, maybe the antlers piece of evidence isn't that great. Rudy has a joking personality, and the knight laughs when Susie says that the knight wouldn't be able to beat them in the light world, which I would think Rudy would find that quite ironic. And there is some sort of weird interaction between Susie and Rudy that could suggest Rudy not liking Susie for some unexplained reason. Now, the main gripe I have with this candidate is that Rudy is too weak to do anything the knight is doing. Some people think that Rudy is lying about his sickness, but that just doesn't make sense in my opinion. The doctors would be able to see that nothing is wrong with Rudy and that he's perfectly healthy. And also, Chapter 5 debunks this, since Rudy is in the hospital before the Dark Fountain is made, and while the knight shows up later in the chapter, it would be odd if the hospital just let Rudy leave, since what seems to have happened is very serious. Now, there is a good amount of evidence for all these theories, but there's always some sort of odd information that doesn't really line up fully. My knight candidate is one that can explain all of these weird oddities and feel shocking enough when revealed. But when you look at all the information, it starts to make a little more sense. My knight candidate is Noelle Holiday. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is just stupid. Noelle doesn't even know what a dark world is in Chapter 2, and are you just saying that she's a really good actor and she's lying to us and Chris is somehow the player at the same time? No. I think that the knight is the side B, or weird route version of Noelle. Let me explain by talking about what I think the Weird Route's purpose is. I promise I'll get to Noelle Knight, but this context and mini-theory is important to discuss for this. I think Side B is not going to be a subversion of the prophecy. I don't think it's going to be broken, and I don't think Toby would lie to us consistently about saying there is only one ending. I think that Side B is going to show us the creation of the night. I believe the ending of Side B will have us end up going back to before Chapter 1. Now, if you remember, the first save point of Deltarune already has a save file that is Chris's save file, and we overwrite it. That has always been a weird thing that doesn't really have an explanation in game yet. With Toby Fox continually saying that there is still one ending, I think me and many others think that there is some sort of time loop going on in Deltarune, and that would explain there being, two Noelles. Now, how would we even go back that far in the game? Well, bringing up another theory is the growing a soul in Noelle theory. I don't think the red dot is a soul growing inside of Noelle. We have never seen anything in either Undertale nor Deltarune that would suggest that a soul is capable of growing or being made artificially. If we think about this red dot, we've actually seen something similar in-game already. That being Susie's and Chris's eyes when they both make dark fountains. I think this red dot is actually a representation of Noelle's determination. We can see the red dot grow in size as well between chapters of Side B. We know that not everyone has determination, and if they do, it's not equal in strength. Susie's pupil, when she made her dark fountain, is smaller than when we see Chris's pupil as they make their dark fountain. This suggests that Chris has more determination than Susie. I think that the growing dot, possibly being Noelle's pupil, is Noelle's determination getting stronger. Noelle becomes stronger. In Chapter 5, there are a lot of weird one-off sentences about Jevil and a lot of parallels to Chapter 1. I think the game is trying to get us to think about Chapter 1 more and also Jevil. We know the secret bosses want freedom. They want to break free of the role that they were put in. Now, we also know that the knight is the one who has given each secret boss a shadow crystal. This makes them go crazy and stuff. I think the reason Chapter 5 mentions Jevil so much is to get us to think about what Jevil's mindset was while they became crazy or after they became crazy. Jevil sees the world as a game and everyone as its participants. Now, in Chapter 5 Side B, when Noelle goes crazy mode on us, she wants to break free of the role that she's put in. She doesn't want to be a Noelle that does Noelle things anymore. She wants to do something crazy. She also outright says, I can do anything, which, if that is intentional to connect Noelle with Jevil, it proves that Noelle is now seeing the world as a game where nothing matters and she can do whatever she wants. If Noelle sees this world as a game, that would also explain why the knight is able to cut Flowery's fake stats to 0. She knows that Flowery gave himself these stats, and because she knows it's a game, she's not going to bind herself to the rules of the world, right? Side B is going to be us giving Noelle so much determination to break free of the game and her role as Noelle that she's able to do what she wants now. I think Noelle will be able to get more determination than the player and send us back to before Chapter 1. We've seen this in Undertale. The Omega Flowey boss fight, not to be confused with Omega Flowery, shows Flowey loading their own save file over and over and over again. It also shows Flowery literally breaking her own save file and deleting it. Whoever holds more determination in Undertale is able to control the state of the save files. I think that might be the case for Deltarune as well. Flowey overwrites our own save file just like how we overwrite Chris's previous save file. I think Noelle will be able to do the same. With the amount of determination we give her, she'll reset back to before Chapter 1, and this will kick off the events of Deltarune. Now, as we know from Undertale, when a monster has too much determination, they turn into an amalgamate. I think That's what Noelle will turn into, an amalgam. And that's why the knight looks the way it does, why it can change shape, and it still has antlers. Maybe the antlers were important after all. If we look at the Undying in Undertale, before she transforms, you can see her figure change and shift a bit. If we look at how the knight looks when they're defeated, doesn't that look a little bit similar? Also, when the knight roars, if we speed up the sound effect, it sounds very similar to Noelle's scream. People have been using this as evidence for Death Knight because Des and Noelle are siblings. They're going to sound similar. But what if it's literally just Noelle? Now, we also know the knight uses the black knife, or at least a sword, in the boss fight. In-game, Noelle cannot equip swords, so boom, theory broken, right? No. In the code, Noelle currently can only equip 2 swords, the Jingle Blade and the Black Shard. If you know, we get the Black Shard by defeating the knight, which if Noelle is a knight and can equip the Black Shard, you see where I'm getting at with this? Let's now look at some new information in Chapter 5. We know that there has been Dark Fountains created before we started playing Deltarune. The one in the computer lab that may have played a hand in Des's disappearance. Now, why the computer lab? What's so special about that? Why not the shelter? Well, the computer lab is the first dark world Noelle has experienced, and also the first place she got stronger. Now, if you remember that cutscene with Asgore talking about what happened that night, the screen goes red and the Thorn Ring effect plays, just like in Chapter 4, Side B. I think this also disproves Death Knight. Asgore knows someone made the old Dark Fountain, and that it made Des go missing. But if Des was the knight and created the Dark Fountain, wouldn't Asgore know that? But if it's Noelle Knight, the situation would make a lot more sense. Rousey also mentions that he thought the knight showed up when the heroes did, and if the time loop theory is true, that would technically still be the case. We know that Dark Fountains change depending on who made them. We also know that the Dark Fountains made by Chris and the Knight are basically identical. I propose that the reason for this is because Side B Noelle basically becomes one with Chris or the soul/player. She will listen to anything we or Chris says. We put her in a trance and mold her mind to fit what benefits us. If Noelle is the knight, that would be the reason the Dark Fountains are identical. It is literally the same determination or thought process or mindset that we give her. This theory would also help out Carol working with the knight. Like I mentioned earlier, if Des is the knight, why is Carol looking for Des still? If Noelle is the knight, she'll be able to tell Carol she knows where to look for Des. And of course, Carol is going to listen to the knight in that case. Now some counter evidence is, why does the knight pose like Chris? This is the one thing I can't quite figure out. My only thought is maybe instead of just Noelle becoming an amalgam, the knight, then maybe Chris and Noelle literally fuse and turn into an amalgam together. And if Noelle listens to anything Chris says during the night boss fight when Chris coughs, Chris is telling Noelle to finish up. Amalgams in Undertale aren't treated like separate monsters, but they're treated like one being, and it would explain why the knight poses like Chris, and why the knight would also listen to what Chris tells them to do. It also would explain better why the Dark Fountains are identical between Chris and the knight. It could also explain why and how the two of them are able to access save files and potentially go back to before Chapter 1. I'm not sure if I'm fully for this version of Noelle Knight, or just Noelle being the knight, but it is another interesting thing to think about. Now, I wanted this video to be pretty quick. I don't want to waste anyone's time because this theory is pretty crazy, and I can understand if people don't believe it, but I think I think answers some unanswered questions that we have, and it can fill in the gaps about what happened and what's gonna happen in Deltarune. It might be a lot. Hopefully, more people will consider Noelle as a possibility for the night, or if you believe Chris Noelle amalgam night theory or whatever you want to call it, then maybe that would also be the case as well. But yeah, that's really all of my thoughts about chapter 5. I might make another video about this theory, maybe going deeper into these topics. But yeah, if you want more Deltarune theories or Deltarune related content, I guess I'm a Deltarune YouTuber now. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know what you guys think about this. I think it'd be interesting to also spark debates about if this is an actual possibility or not. That's it, guys. I'll see you at a later time. Bye-bye.